The sky above Hiroshima was clear on August 6, 1945. At 8:15 a.m., a single, unassuming American bomber, the Enola Gay, released its payload. In the terrifying 15 seconds that followed, an entire city vanished. 3 days later, the same nightmare descended upon Nagasaki. These were the moments that ended the deadliest war in human history, but they were carried out by men, pilots, who would forever be marked by the unspeakable power they unleashed. This is the code behind Paul Tibbets and Charles Sweeney, the men who dropped the sun. To understand their mission, we must go back to the top-secret Manhattan Project. For years, thousands of the brightest scientific minds had worked in absolute secrecy to harness the power of the atom. On July 16, 1945, in the barren desert of New Mexico, they conducted the first test, codenamed Trinity. At 5:29 a.m., the device detonated, producing a flash of light brighter than 1,000 suns and a mushroom cloud that rose 40,000 feet into the sky. J. Robert Oppenheimer, the project's scientific director, later recalled a line from Hindu scripture, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The atomic age had begun. But many of its creators, horrified by the power they had unleashed, signed petitions begging President Truman not to use the bomb on a civilian city. The final decision rested on the shoulders of one man, Harry S. Truman. He had been president for less than 4 months, thrust into power by the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt, and now faced the most momentous decision of the war. His military advisors presented him with horrifying projections for Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan. They predicted the fighting would last for another year, costing up to 1 million American lives and millions more Japanese. Faced with this grim arithmetic, Truman saw the bomb not as a tool of terror, but as a tool to save lives by forcing a swift surrender. From the Potsdam Conference in Germany, the Allies issued a final ultimatum to Japan: surrender unconditionally or face prompt and utter destruction. Japan, its military leadership still refusing to accept defeat, ignored the warning. For Truman, the path was now clear. The order was given. Paul Tibbets was an extraordinary pilot, chosen for an extraordinary task. He was the commander of the 509th Composite Group, the top-secret unit formed specifically to deliver the atomic bomb. On the remote Pacific island of Tinian, he oversaw a massive operation, a city built from scratch, with thousands of men and the most advanced bombers in the world, all focused on a single, secret goal. He was a stern, disciplined leader, focused solely on the mission. For Tibbets, there was no moral ambiguity. It was a soldier's duty. He believed with absolute conviction that dropping the bomb would save lives. His plane, a B-29 Superfortress, was named the Enola Gay after his mother. On August 6, 1945, the Enola Gay took off. Aboard was the little boy atomic bomb. At 8:15 a.m., over Hiroshima, the bomb was released. The Enola Gay immediately executed a sharp turn. When the bomb detonated, the crew saw a blinding flash of light, followed by a colossal, mushroom-shaped cloud. Tibbets later described the taste of lead in his mouth. In that instant, tens of thousands of people died, and an entire city was flattened. 3 days later, the war still raged. The Soviet Union had declared war on Japan, and still, Japan refused to surrender. A second mission was ordered. This time, Major Charles Sweeney was the pilot of the B-29 boxcar, carrying the Fat Man atomic bomb, an even more powerful device. Sweeney was a close friend of Tibbets, a seasoned pilot known for his skill and steady nerves. But this mission was plagued by difficulties from the start. Bad weather over the primary target, Kokura, forced them to divert to their secondary target, Nagasaki. They had very little fuel remaining. Over Nagasaki, the crew faced intense pressure. Fuel was critically low, and the city was obscured by clouds. Sweeney considered returning, but knowing the importance of the mission, he decided to make one final run, using a gap in the clouds. At 11:02 a.m., the Fat Man was released. The blast was even more devastating than Hiroshima's, leveling parts of the city and killing tens of thousands. The boxcar, running on fumes, barely made it back to base, landing with just a few minutes of fuel left. 2 cities had been obliterated, and the world had changed forever. On August 15, 1945, Japan surrendered. World War II was officially over. For Tibbets and Sweeney, the mission was complete. They were hailed as heroes. But the shadow of their actions would follow them, and their crewmates, for the rest of their lives. Paul Tibbets remained unrepentant. He consistently maintained that he had no regrets, that he was a soldier who followed orders, and that the bomb was a necessary evil. He continued to fly for the U.S. Air Force, retiring as a brigadier general. For decades, he received death threats and criticism, but he never wavered in his conviction. He requested that upon his death, he be cremated and his ashes scattered, to prevent his grave from becoming a site of protest. Charles Sweeney, on the other hand, carried a heavier, more public burden. While he too defended the mission as a necessary act of war, he spoke more openly about the horror. He spent years educating the public about the dangers of nuclear weapons, becoming an outspoken advocate for nuclear non-proliferation. The co-pilot of the boxcar, Fred Alevy, expressed a similar sentiment, stating that while he believed it was necessary, he prayed such a weapon would never be used again. The tail gunner of the Enola Gay, George Caron, took the only photographs of the Hiroshima explosion. He later said, "When you see something like that, it's so tremendous, it's so terrible, you just can't comprehend it." Others in the crew remained silent, carrying the memory of the fire they had unleashed. The bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki was not just the final act of World War II, it was also the first act of the Cold War. The display of such absolute power was a clear and terrifying signal to the Soviet Union, America's next great rival. The atomic bomb redrew the map of global power, creating a new and terrifying balance of terror that would haunt the world for the next 50 years. The decision to drop the bomb was not just military, it was deeply geopolitical. The code of these men is one of immense moral complexity. They were soldiers, following orders, believing they were saving lives, but they were also the instruments of unspeakable destruction. Their stories force us to confront the terrifying dilemma of war, the choices made in moments of crisis, and the lasting burden of actions that reshape humanity forever. They ended a war, but they began the atomic age, a world forever changed by the power they unleashed. And that is the architecture of the choices of Paul Tibbets and Charles Sweeney. Remember, history is more than a story. It's a code, and there is always another layer to decrypt. Subscribe and continue the investigation with us.